Look at the people sitting around you. Look at the person sleeping next to you in bed, or the child laughing in your living room. You think you know them, don't you? You think the foundation of your life is made of solid rock. But what if I told you that sometimes the life you love is built entirely on a shadow? What if the person you trust most in the world has been holding a secret so heavy it has the power to erase your past and rewrite your future in a single second? My name is Arthur. I am a quiet man. I work as an architect in Bath, England. For nearly 10 years, I believed I was the luckiest man on earth. I had a beautiful wife named Clara, a peaceful home, and a son, Toby, who was the absolute center of my universe. I thought I knew everything about my family. I thought my life was a simple, beautiful story. But exactly 3 years ago, inside the freezing, bright emergency room of St. Jude's Medical Center, a doctor looked at a simple piece of paper, frowned, and asked me a question that stopped my heart. Are you absolutely sure you are the father? That was the moment I realized my entire life was a lie. To understand how it all fell apart, you have to understand how it began. I was never the loud, exciting guy. I was careful, thoughtful, and steady. When I met Clara at a quiet dinner party, I fell for her instantly. She had a sadness in her eyes that I wanted to fix. When we started dating, she was guarded. I brought her flowers, I asked about her day, and I tried to be the safe harbor she seemed to need. She didn't talk much about her past. I knew there had been another man, someone named Julian, back when she was at university in Bristol. I knew he was wild, unpredictable, and that he had broken her heart by vanishing without a trace. But I didn't care about him. I cared about her. When I asked her to marry me, she said yes, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I told myself that love wasn't always a fiery explosion. Sometimes, I thought, love is just a quiet choice you make every day. We were married quickly. A few months later, Clara told me she was pregnant. I cried tears of pure joy. When Toby was born, I held that tiny, fragile boy in my arms, and I made a silent promise to the universe. I will protect you, I whispered to him. You are mine, and I am yours forever. For years, I was a happy man. I changed the late-night nappies. I paced the hallway at 3 a.m. singing soft songs to get him to sleep. I taught him how to kick a ball, how to tie his shoes, and how to be kind. As Toby grew, I noticed he didn't look much like me. He had dark, messy hair and a sharp chin. He had a fierce, sudden laugh. I just assumed he looked like Clara's side of the family. I never doubted my wife. I was just an ordinary man, tired from a long day at work, trying to be a good husband and a good father. We were normal. We ate Sunday dinners, took walks in the park, and celebrated birthdays with messy chocolate cakes. I gave them every piece of my soul. But I didn't know that Clara was carrying a ghost in our house. The day my world ended was a bright, sunny Saturday. Toby was 8 years old. He had a school football match. Clara and I were standing on the sidelines holding hot cups of coffee, cheering as Toby ran down the green field. The wind was cold, but the sun felt warm. Then everything stopped. Toby didn't trip. No one tackled him. He just suddenly stopped running. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed onto the grass like a broken toy. I dropped my coffee. The cup shattered. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, my heart pounding in my throat. I fell to my knees beside him on the wet grass. He was completely pale. His lips were turning blue. Clara was screaming behind me, a terrible, piercing sound. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and terrifying sirens. At St. Jude's Medical Center, the nurses rushed Toby through a set of double doors. We sat in the waiting room for hours. The clock on the wall ticked so loudly it felt like a hammer in my head. Finally, a doctor walked out. His face was serious. "Toby has an internal bleed," he said quickly. "He needs a blood transfusion immediately, but his blood type is incredibly rare. We need to test the parents right now." "Take mine," I said, rolling up my sleeve before he even finished his sentence. "Take all of it." They drew my blood. I sat in a plastic chair, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years, begging him to save my little boy. 20 minutes later, the doctor returned. He wasn't rushing anymore. He walked slowly. He looked at his clipboard, then looked at me, then looked at Clara. "Mr. Evans," the doctor said slowly, "your blood type is O negative. Your wife is A positive, but Toby is AB positive." I stared at him. The medical terms meant nothing to my panicked brain. "I don't care," I said, my voice shaking. "Just fix him." The doctor lowered the clipboard. "Sir, it is medically impossible for an O negative father and an A positive mother to produce an AB positive child." He paused, the silence in the room growing heavy and thick. "Are you absolutely sure you are the father?" The room started to spin. The white walls of the hospital seemed to close in on me. I looked at Clara. She wasn't looking at the doctor. She was staring at the floor. Her face was as white as paper. Her hands were shaking violently. She didn't defend me. She didn't shout at the doctor that he was wrong. She just stood there, freezing in her guilt. In that horrible, silent moment, the puzzle pieces of the last 9 years slammed together. The quick marriage, the math of the pregnancy, the dark hair, the sharp chin. Toby wasn't my son. That night, after Toby was stabilized, Clara and I sat in the dark kitchen of our home. We didn't turn on the lights. She cried until she couldn't breathe. She told me everything. She told me about Julian. She told me how he had abandoned her, how she found out she was pregnant a few weeks later, and how terrified she was of facing her strict parents alone. "I didn't mean to do this, Arthur," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I just wanted him to have a safe life. You were so kind. You were so good. I lied, and then the lie became my whole life." I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, that it hollowed me out completely. I stood up, walked away, and didn't speak to her for days. I moved like a ghost through my own home. I wondered if I should pack my bags. I wondered if I should walk out the door and never come back. But then, Toby came home from the hospital. He was weak, pale, and looking for me. When he reached out his little arms and called me Dad, my heart shattered all over again. How could I leave him? A few weeks later, the nightmare got worse. I was standing in the kitchen when a car pulled up to our house. A man stepped out. He was tall, with dark hair and a sharp chin. He walked up my driveway like he owned it. It was Julian. He'd found out. He stood on my front step looking past me at Clara. "I've watched from a distance," he said, his voice cold. "I know he's mine. I want a DNA test, and if he's mine, I want my rights." I felt a blinding rage. "You have no idea who that boy is," I told him, my voice dangerously low. "You weren't there when he took his first steps. You didn't stay up when he was sick. You disappeared when things got hard. But the law doesn't care about who stayed up late. The law only cares about biology." Julian forced the DNA test. The results were positive. He demanded visitation rights. He wanted joint custody. The lawyers told me I had no power to stop him because legally I was nobody to Toby. I was just a man who lived in the same house. Julian started taking Toby every other Saturday. Every time Toby walked out the door with this stranger, a piece of my soul died. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Toby came home from school looking furious. He threw his backpack on the floor. I knelt down in front of him. "Hey, little man, what's wrong?" Toby looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "Julian told me something today. He said he is my real dad. He said I came from him." Toby's lower lip trembled. He looked up at me, terrified. "Arthur, are you still my dad?" Time stopped. I looked at this boy, the boy I had fed, bathed, taught, and loved with every fiber of my being. I looked at his frightened eyes, begging me not to leave him. All the anger I had toward Clara, all the hatred I had toward Julian, it all melted away in the warmth of my love for this child. I wrapped my arms tightly around him. "Listen to me, Toby," I whispered, holding him as close as I could. "A real dad doesn't just give you life. A real dad is the one who stays. A real dad is the one who loves you every single day. I am your dad. I have always been your dad, and no one, nobody in this world will ever change that." That night, I looked at Clara. We were broken, but we weren't dead yet. I told her we were going to therapy. We found a brilliant counselor named Dr. Bennett. For months, we sat in her office. We screamed, we cried, we dug up years of buried pain. One afternoon, Dr. Bennett looked at me and asked, "Arthur, beneath all the anger, what do you truly want?" I looked at Clara, then at the doctor. "I want to be Toby's father in every way. I said firmly. Not just in my heart, in the eyes of the world. I want to legally adopt him. It was a brutal fight. Julian fought back. He argued, he threatened court, but I didn't back down. I told him face to face, we are not erasing you, but Toby deserves a father who chose him, not a father who showed up out of guilt. Eventually, Julian realized he couldn't play the role of a father. He liked the idea of a son, but he didn't like the hard work of parenting. After months of legal battles, he finally signed the papers. On Toby's 9th birthday, we went to the courthouse. The judge stamped the paper. It was official. I was legally Arthur Evans, father to Toby Evans. When we walked out of the building, Toby grabbed my hand. He looked up at me with a huge smile. "Now you're really my dad," he said. I wiped a tear from my face. I always was, Toby. I always was. Healing didn't happen overnight. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's shattered, you can glue it back together, but you will always see the cracks. Clara and I had to learn how to love each other all over again. We started small. We rebuilt our house of cards into a house of bricks, slowly, day by day. I learned something profound through all that pain. I used to think love was a feeling. I thought it was just something that happened to you, like the weather. But I was wrong. Love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. It is a hard, heavy, intentional choice you make every single day. Love is choosing to stay when you have every reason to walk away. Family is not defined by blood, DNA, or what a piece of paper says. Family is defined by who shows up when the sky falls down. Today, my family is stronger than ever, not because we are perfect, but because we survived the ultimate storm. But what about you? Think about the people in your life. Think about the choices you make every day. If you found out a terrible truth tomorrow, a truth that shattered your reality, would you have the strength to walk away? Or would you have the courage to stay, to forgive, and to rebuild? Love isn't easy, but the best things in life never are. If this story moved you, don't forget to leave a like and share it with other English learners. Did you learn any new words today? Tell me your favorite part of the story in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next inspiring story to help you master English.